Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. From this first day of the Starts Urban Fest, online first day. My name is Linda Di Pietro. I am the Chief Cultural Officer of Base Milano, an innovation hub based in Milano, and I will moderate the panel about participation, co-creation, and imagination for a more democratic city. We will look through best practices from Europe. Is a session about learning. So the aim is to learn from experiences of our panelists that I'm going to introduce you now. The first one is Outi Kuittinen, that for over 10 years, she's been growing the think tank Demos in Helsinki. Her latest challenge is building Untitled, which is a global cross-sectoral alliance of activists for social imagination and experimentation. The Untitled Community works together throughout the year, collaborates around real-life experiments and celebrated in an annual festival. Outi has also been a visiting Fulbright scholar at the Harvard University and taught in Parsons School of Design in the New School in the University of Helsinki and the Aalto University. Welcome, Outi. We also have with us Menno Weiss, is the project manager at the European Cultural Foundation. This foundation is based in Amsterdam and promotes European solidarity since 1955 and develops cultural initiatives, call for applications, grants that help cultural and social organizations to rethink and reimagine a more solidal Europe. Menno is responsible for a portfolio of projects within the foundation and the Solidarity Fund, which was opened during the lockdown, was one of the experiences that we found very relevant, especially in that moment of our pandemic life. Thank you, Menno, for being with us. Jesse Carson is a design researcher and interaction designer, is specialized in community engagement, in facilitation, and in new media communication. Jesse currently leads design and communication for the global research project and digital community called Participedia.net. And she also co-directs the Vancouver Design Nerds, which is a non-profit society that provides equity-centered design leadership and engagement and impact training courses. The Participedia.net was really interesting to us, also received the Ars Electronica prize. I don't remember if it was in 2019 or 2018, but she will tell us more. Thanks to my colleague panelists to be with us. This is going to be a conversation and we will go through a set of questions, but we would love to receive questions from the audience. So please feel free to send questions about more information or also comment about what we're going to talk about. The core of this panel is going to be the role of community engagement, participation, co-creation within nowadays society. As you know, the role of communities has become more and more relevant, especially when facing crisis. Cities and communities become more vulnerable, but at the same time, they find new ways of reacting, new ways of cooperating, of mobilizing. This session is trying to bring together different initiatives from all over Europe and abroad that are approach the potential of arts, innovation, and collaboration, so co-creation, to bring about change and also to solve societal challenges that have to do with thematics that are not strictly cultural, but also linked to social issues, to economical issues, to civic issues. From the Untitled Community to the experience of the European Cultural Foundation and the initiative of Participedia, we can learn what these diverse initiatives, organizations are doing to reimagine a more participative, democratic and inclusive future for Europe. Also from their paths, which have been not just successful, but also full of choices to make. I will, first of all, would like my colleague panelists to introduce themselves, to speak about their model to involve artists and citizens in shaping the future of cities, and how you interpret the concept of participation from the side of your initiatives and experiences. I will ask Oti to start this first round. Thank you.
Thank you. So hello, everybody. Nice to be here. And Linda was introducing Untitled quite well, and I'll just specify some things or tell where we are. So we started Untitled Community, or the Alliance, last year, and we are currently about 40 organizations from different parts of the world and about like 100 individuals. And the idea of the Alliance is that it's not trying to be a representative of anything. What we have been trying to do is to bring together an unlikely alliance. And what connects those organizations and people involved, that they are people who and organizations who want to be very ambitious about the social transformation we're in. And we have think tank people, we have business people, we have trade union people, and we have artists. And the idea is also like to expand the agency of transformation, like who are the ones who are driving the social transformation and who are the ones who are saying what things are important and how things could be. And as here, I was asked to highlight the art and artist role. So artists make about like 20% of our community members. And even though artists are at the same time like any other members of our community, we also see art and artists have a very special role in our approach, because Untitled is based on the idea that we are experiencing a crisis of imagination, which means that it's easier for us to imagine a collapse than a better society. And we want to believe that a better world is possible and worth the struggle. And here the artists are super important, because artists are experts of seeing the difference between what is and what can be. And this is an ability that we need to be able to reimagine the institutions of our societies. So our artists are bringing us into the community, their ways of seeing and working in this transformation. And then kind of very connected to that is that art is both a tool but also a goal in the social transformation. We believe that the process of transformation and the end goal can't be different. So if we're moving from the industrial mode of production of input output to something else that might be more kind of artistic approach of creating and investigating, and artists are also needed to generate new meanings and new values and new practices and ideas that are like necessary for building new institutions and new systems in the societies. So that is our kind of special place for what we have come to in this year and a half when we worked. This is what we found the role of the artist to be in our community and in our work.
Yeah, Oti, if you would like, I would love to know more about the model of Untitled, or at least how it works, which I think is very experimental and very specific and unique, if you want to tell us a little bit about it.
If I have time. So Untitled, well, it's a community, so people can do whatever they want, but we're trying to bring those different organizations and people together in different ways. At the moment, we have like 3 kind of major functions. One is our experiment attractor program, for kind of like accelerator program for new experimental, even radical models. And there, in our first cohort, together with the Housing Foundation, with the Housing Project, we also have our artist team with the artistic project. So we're putting them in the same line. Then we have a companionship program, which is a peer-to-peer support and care program for ambitious change makers. And that is totally multidisciplinary group. What connects them is that they're all trying to do very hard work, very avant-garde work. And then we have an annual Untitled Festival, which is like one artist said, it's like a festival, festival as a think tank. So it's our kind of intense epicenter to bring people and ideas together and work on those things together between different community members and guests that they invite. I can tell more, but maybe we move to others and I can...
Thank you. There's also a very interesting design on the website, which explains a lot about the model. Menno, European Cultural Foundation, we said something. You have actually a lot of programs that are working at a European level. Please speak about how European Cultural Foundation is involving artists and citizens in trying to reshape the future of Europe.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well, because my connection seems to get stuck sometimes, but if the other direction it goes well, then it's fine for me. Thank you for the introduction. I think actually all our programs are on that, so I don't even know where to start, but maybe more in general, the European Cultural Foundation was founded in the 50s, so not that long after the Second World War. And of course, in the same time, there were talks starting about the current European Union, at that time, the European Coal and Steel Community. But intellectuals at that time were meeting in Geneva, and they thought that Europe is about so much more than just coal and steel, which were, of course, the kind of symbols for economic collaboration and recovery after the war. But Europe can only work together, and if we want to achieve that aim of never having a war again, then we need to create some kind of European solidarity or European sentiment, and that can only be achieved through culture, because as Oti already said, culture is a way to imagine a future, to not only see what's there, but also what could be, as Oti put it. And I think culture has a very important role also in kind of building a social glue. It's an instrument. It's a way for individuals to express themselves, but also to express a community and even to negotiate within a community how we live together. So I think in that sense, culture has a crucial role in achieving solidarity. Now the programs and then of course, you can have the European sentiment, but then it's still the question on which values. I mean, is it a very top-down sentiment in which we all need to feel European, or is it something that's based on what citizens actually value and find important? And so the Europe we stand for is an open and democratic, but also very inclusive Europe. And our work, at least in recent years, of course, in different times, there's different contexts, but in recent years especially, we kind of focus on the intersection between democracy, culture, and community. And I think those three concepts come together very well in the term commons, which means to hand over the power about how a certain thing is managed or governed to the people who actually have an interest in that goods or commodity. And I think this is very important as a value base for our work. And I can give tons of examples on how we work exactly, but I think what is important that you includes citizens from the beginning, and that is where culture plays a crucial role, because if culture is done not anymore in the very traditional concept where an artist performs for an audience, but if culture is defined as something that is done with an audience, and a process in which people come together, exchange ideas, exchange visions, and exchange dreams, then the line between the division line between what is art in the very traditional sense of the word, culture, and social is fading, and that is, I think, where our work is all based around. And that goes from grants programs in which we support projects that encourage, that foster solidarity. Last year we had a specific focus, because of the corona pandemic, on the kind of reimagining European solidarity. When the crisis happened, everyone was kind of turning into itself, and we were looking for opening up and finding European collaboration in such a crisis period in which everyone in Europe experiences the same issues. We do it through supporting activists by providing them with ways to express their issues, also about the right to the city, for example, through media. And we do support the concept of the home of commons, where citizens and policymakers come together. So we have also a very strong policy and advocacy components. But what all of those approaches have in common is that they put the citizen at the center, and the culture as a kind of system in which we operate.
Thanks a lot, Menno. Thanks a lot. The Solidarity Fund was, one of the examples of the many things you've done, because I guess you received tons of applications. It was a peculiar moment where the reaction to the crisis was a real community actually engagement. No, so I now pass the word to Jessie, which brings to the conversation another model, the Participedia.net model, which tries to connect communities and digital and physical. This was one of my questions. Please tell us a little bit more about the Participedia project.
Thanks, Linda. It's great to be here. Those were really interesting to hear about those projects of Uta and Menno. My name is Jessie. I'm here from Canada, actually. Participedia is a global network, and we're quite distributed. And just a quick acknowledgement, I'm joining from the traditional and unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations peoples. So to give you a bit of a sense, I guess Participedia is first and foremost a network, a research network that was formed largely by political scientists interested in democratic participation, and that's grown over the years. It was founded in 2009. And during this time, they built a crowdsourcing platform to support the research that they're doing. So that's basically my role. I lead the design and technology team, which was founded in 2015 by an artist as well, actually. Her name's Amber Frid Jimenez at Emily Carr University of Art and Design in Vancouver. And I guess what I'm bringing to this conversation is that we actually use co-design. We do participatory design and apply feminist approaches to human-computer interaction to design and build the open source platform, and also do our best to engage this community, and I guess really bring design to a community of scholars and activists where there aren't a lot of cultural representatives. There aren't a lot of artists in this community. So we're trying to bring that element in. So it's really interesting to hear from both of you. And I would say that the Untitled project and the Solidarity Fund could definitely be cases on participedia.net. So I won't talk too long because I'm going to play a short video about the project, give you a bit more context. But essentially, Participedia looks at what participation is through the lens of democratic innovation. So any way that citizens, people can advance the ideas of self-governance and organizing and making change in the world themselves. So whether that's very formal and government-led or very grassroots and activist-driven, Participedia covers all of those bases. So we share a lot of examples of those on our crowdsourcing platform, and the researchers we work with are very interested in those topics. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there, and if you could just play this short video about Participedia, that would be great. Thank you.
I believe that democracy is facing its greatest threat since the end of the Second World War. There are forces that are threatening to erode democratic principles and values across the world. Xenophobia, inequalities within and between nations, rising forms of populist nationalism, the disruptions of COVID-19 pandemic. Participedia responds to these challenges in democracy by mobilizing knowledge to defend and expand democracy around the world.
Participedia has produced a platform that allows us to very rapidly gather and map emerging democratic innovations. For example, in Cape Town, in South Africa, Black Sash works with very marginalized communities to develop the capacity to ask the state why it is not providing basic social services. The sort of north-south binary, I think, is being shifted in Participedia towards a more global perspective and towards a framework of mutual learning.
We're especially interested in Participedia in understanding what kinds of innovations work for what types of issues, when, where, under what conditions, trying to figure out how to translate democratic innovations that work in one context to new contexts.
Participedia offers a large array of experiences and ideas and proposals and experiments covering over 1,800 cases and 330 method entries all around the world on every policy issue and public problem almost that you can imagine. The Participedia platform has generated more than 2,000 active users who are contributing and engaging with content.
Participedia has a very exciting design team, women-led and women-driven.
The designer, developer, we are all women and all inclusive. The data are public, and the code is stored publicly. We use a lot of open source technology. It's not just our team that get a chance to making Participedia better. Anyone could.
Participedia is useful for practitioners. In terms of accessibility, Participedia really allows for just anybody to look up how to do something in their community.
We've got a really exciting opportunity here to build a very long-lasting community of democracy practitioners and activists and researchers who can sustain democracy in the long term.
The vision is to make Participedia the global classroom for democratic innovation that all sectors of our local and international community can use.
Thank you, Jesse. It was very clear, the video. Thanks a lot for bringing it in. And now that we more or less have shared the projects and the point we look at the world from, I would like to tackle the real potential of collaboration and co-creation to bring about change, and the approach you use to involve this cross-pollination between artists, policymakers, businesses to foster imagination. How the concept of co-creation works from your experiences, from your point of view, in co-imagining. So who is in charge of co-imagining? How inclusive is this process in the end? And what do you have to do to make it more inclusive and accessible, which is now how to change the question from what do we do, who do we do this for, or who is in charge of this? Who do we do this with? So to change the for with the with, and understanding that the co, how large is this co of the collaboration and co-creation. Oti.
Me again, going first.
Shall we change? Now, because I saw Menno was having some problems with the connection, so I didn't want to.
I would love to hear someone else go first. Because
okay, Menno, can you? Yeah. Is the connection right now? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's like usually the sound works anyway. It's just a video that sometimes switches off, but that's okay. I will just keep on talking when that happens. Now, I think what is crucial here is indeed the question who's included and what. Like, there's also ways to do participation in a way, and often it's done by governments that it's just a way to achieve an aim, like there's already an idea, then at some point you need to involve citizens because otherwise they won't be on board and you will get protests or whatever. But the question is very much like, when do you involve them? When you have already your idea and you just want to have that confirmed, but also who do you involve? And that's also a risk with the kind of programs we work with, is that it needs an additional effort to be really inclusive. I mean, you can say it's open, but that usually brings people to the table that are that have the kind of almost a luxury to participate in these kind of processes. So I think it's really important to make an explicit effort to also have the ones on board that do not have naturally the time and the resources to invest in such a process. So I think that's an important learning from our work, that you're often kind of attracts people if you do not pay explicit attention. That would, maybe find their way themselves already. But the challenge is to attract also others that do not feel their voice is, or their perspective is relevant.
Yeah, and do you use specific actions, like positive actions, to do this? I mean, within the call for application, for example, you explicit some policies dedicated to specific groups, or you open also to informal organizations, so not just formal ones.
Yeah, I think it's not enough. We do that as well, as I think many do, to write like a little afterthought, I would always call it. Like, we are explicitly open towards marginalized groups, people with different backgrounds, LGBTIQ communities, people with a non-European background, etc. I think that's important to say that, but it's about much more. So I think it's about the language you use, that it is inviting not just to a kind of a specific, maybe intellectual, educated group of people that are already part of this networks, and it's very important also to your dissemination strategy, because there's a certain community who knows if you talk specifically about grant making in this question, there's a group of people who does have access to the kind of funding opportunities, but there's a much larger group. So I'm not even talking about marginalized groups or anything, but just people who have no idea about funding opportunities, but they have good ideas for sure. And then the risk is always that you think, okay, then we will just train them and you'll organize all kinds of events. But to do that, which is okay, but it's also not always the way, because you have to risk that you kind of create a monster by teaching people how to write a very good application. But that doesn't necessarily mean that their projects are good. So it's more about using a certain language that is inclusive, but also to reach out to channels that can disseminate your call indirectly to the communities they work with on the floor. Because we, from our villa in Amsterdam, because our office is kind of a villa, which is also symbolic in Amsterdam, we cannot reach out, but we do work to everyone. But we do work with organizations that do have this community. And one good example, and then I stop to give the others also more space, is a project called Fund Action. It's actually not a project, it's an ongoing fund, and it's a participatory fund in which the community of activists in Europe, and it's a very interdisciplinary and intersectional group of activists working on all kinds of different topics, and it's a very diverse group, and they distribute funding of a number of foundations, including us, by making the decisions on the funding distribution as a community. So everyone there's an online platform, but there's also, if there would be no pandemic, before the pandemic, there were physical meetings, and you can, if you have an idea to tackle a certain issue in a European scope, you can propose it, and then the community can kind of vote and discuss it, and then funding that has been put in by the foundations can distribute that funding. And I think that's a way also to step out of your ivory tower as foundation. We still are involved, but we are not in the seat of decision maker anymore, because we think the community that the funds are meant for actually knows best how this funding should be distributed. And another advantage of this is that you create, by involving them in this process, you create also all kinds of different connections and a mutual support of how these activists can support each other in this work, and really create a European movement to exchange knowledge and work together.
Yeah, super. Very interesting. Can you say again what the name of the fund is?
It's Fund Action. The website is fundaction.eu.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Manu. Jessie.
Sure. Yeah, no, this is a super interesting question. And I was kind of thinking about what to bring to this. Inclusion is such a big topic, especially in design. There's a lot of conversation around, equity in design and design processes themselves needing a refresh for inclusion and equity. But I guess I'll bring something that's just a key learning from my work with Participedia, and I think it's applicable to basically any project in all of our work, which, aims to advance social change or make the world a better place, right? We have these missions that we want to make change. We want to do good things, and that's like our guiding light. We need that vision. But I think where the opportunity for making change and inclusion comes within these projects is really within the process, right? And that's where co-creation and co-design really come in and shine. Looking at the team itself, the technology that you're using, the people who you invite to your spaces, those are all opportunities, things that you can actually change before you get to the end product or the thing that you launch into the world. So for Participedia, an example of how we do this, we draw from feminist HCI theory and other places, and equity by design and other theorists who are looking at these things. And I guess the biggest example of a shift that we made within our project is moving from closed source technology to open source technology. And it seems really simple. It seems like a no-brainer, but it was actually a really big ideological change for the project, which I said started in 2009, and just, they wanted to build a platform. They wanted to crowdsource data about democratic innovations. And what did they do? They hired a tech firm who built them, a prototype platform, which was great. It was a proof of concept, but that platform was essentially then designed almost exclusively by men, almost exclusively by Northern American and European people. So the Global South wasn't really involved in that process at all. And the tech firm itself owned the code, which is normal. That's the traditional model of web development. But for us, it sort of removed the opportunity to then bring in students to help design and build the platform. So we had to make this big leap, which seems small, but it was actually a big change to stop using that traditional model and move to an open source approach where we actually had to rebuild the site from the ground up. But we did so with students and involved, built an in-house diverse team of mostly women, which is really unusual in the tech sector, right? And we've hired women of color. Our founder is a woman of color, a BIPOC, LGBTQ plus coders. This is super unusual in the sector that we're in, and I think sets a good example. And it's just one thing that we could control. We could be inclusive ourselves, so that the tool that we're building, can further advance the goals and the mission of the project, which are to share knowledge about democracy and help make the world a better place at the end of the day, right? So, through that process, we also did co-design engagement, with the community. We listened to diverse voices. We brought in more folks from the Global South who could tell us, what the platform was missing and what we could do to make it better, to serve their needs better. So we changed the data model to include more arts-based types of participation and informal types of participation, which were not really represented previously in the data model of the platform. So, yeah, and
What do you mean with informal data process? Just to understand better.
So, as opposed to, say, like participatory budgeting, which might be organized by a local government, we're looking at things that are really, really grassroots and community driven. And so how Participedia works is basically a data form where we plug in all this information about these examples of democratic participation. And so it was just missing these questions that reflected more representation of these types of informal actions, for example.
Okay.
And we also, we made the site available in multiple languages, things like that to improve accessibility, made it mobile accessible so you could use it in a rural area, that kind of stuff. So aligning the process with the mission. That's the key thing for us.
Yeah, and the informal ones are the most prototypal and experimental ones, I guess, than
I would say so. That's what I can see just by, looking at it.
Super. Thank you, Jessie. Uti, what would you like to bring to this question?
Well, I worked with co-creative processes over 10 years, and I could talk about them in different ways, but I'll talk about them in this context of Untitled, the co-creation there. So, like I said, is that when we started, Demos Housing started to gather together this alliance, and we've said from the beginning that it's not going to be representative. We want it to be an unlikely alliance, but what we really try to put effort in is that it's the quality of the alliance or the community is that those who are in it are really doing avant-garde work, or they are more established institutions who want to renew the way they see and work in the world. And we started last year, so we're still building kind of the ground. But what as a feedback from the last year, what we got from people was that they really value the community, they really value the people in there. So like I said, we've tried to bring in artists and businesses and policymakers and trade unions people and so on. So and why we're trying to do this is that we think that if we are to transform this society into a better one, it can't be that those same organizations and same people from the same sector are trying to reimagine new things, but you really need these unlikely alliances. And like I said, we're still building the base of kind of building structures where these organizations and people can find each other and start building also collaborative projects. But yeah, it looks good because people are really valuing like who is in this co-creation space. But then about the question of inclusivity, like Jesse was saying, is such a big topic, and I think we're all kind of learning to swim, or like learning like what do we actually mean by it, and what's our approach. So even if we say in Untitled that this is not a representative coalition, that would be very intellectually lazy to say like that's how we deal with the inclusivity question. So when we started to build the alliance, we started from our networks because that's what you have. But now we've been trying to put a lot of effort in reaching out to people that we don't have a first connection to organizations and people geographically, and also the issues and approaches they use. And for that is a bit what Menno was saying. It's like the same kind of approach. It's like you need to snowball. It's like, you know someone, and then you're asking like, who would you bring in? And of course, all the time you need to be checking like, okay, what kind of like, where does that then lead to? And about what Menno was saying, like who has the ability to participate. We are not like a citizen program in the sense, so everybody is there in a way in a professional capacity, but that doesn't mean that everybody could still participate. So we're trying to be sensitive of that all the time, trying to have things that people can participate in, and trying to evaluate like what are they means to participate. And then meet them there. So, for example, like who do we pay for some work or not? Thus far, it has been all kind of like everybody invests in the community with their own work, but maybe that can't be the way totally forward. But yeah. I think, well, one of our topic is kind of related to, like our agenda tracks is kind of related to also to the question of inclusivity. So I hope next year I will be wiser. So if there is an Urban Starts Fest, I can tell you more about that next year.
Super, thank you. It's true that we are learning by doing, especially in Europe. Jesse brings in a North American perspective, which is, I believe, already more aware of the concept of equity, diversity, and inclusion, which in Europe is still, especially, I mean, I talk from a South European perspective, but I guess, I mean, it's similar all over Europe. We come from a different, not just history, but also societal relationships and societal frames that are still very strict and rigid, and I mean less fluid than we would love to them to be, and less open. That's why my question, because it's something that I'm asking myself as well. I would like to thank you for this double round. This third round is just like a little leap towards the future, since each one of your initiatives are looking at the past as something we want go back the same as we were, or at least we hope not to go back the same as we were, maybe to go back better than we were. So what is the future challenge for each of your organizations? Even a small challenge. I mean, I don't ask you to tell us the strategy for the next 10 years, but really what is the risk and the future challenge of this post-pandemic moment, if we can already say post, I don't know, but anyway, we call it post-pandemic. So what is the little future challenge and future risks of this moment for the Participedia, for example?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Participedia is in a really interesting moment in time, where we just got another injection of funding that will, keep the project going and growing for the next 5 years. And we've expanded the network to include new partners. And so here we are in a situation where we have these people all around the world where we want to connect with and build collaborative research together, but we can't ever, yet be in the same room. So we're leveraging these digital ways of engaging. So that's going to be one of our challenges. And for me personally, I constantly try to bring design into the project. And so I've got this, this element of co-creation that I want to bring into this collaborative research space. But, oftentimes that conversation is difficult with folks who don't understand design or who haven't done design before. So bringing that language in an inclusive way and an accessible way for folks in the community is my personal challenge. And I just hope to build connections into the future.
Thank you so much. Oti, the future challenges.
Yeah, well, when we started, it was before the pandemic that we started Untitled, and we're kind of like saying that you need to imagine and experiment and refuse the normal. And then the pandemic hit, and suddenly, like everywhere, there was emerging this. Okay, we need and can reimagine the society, because kind of the structural problems that we all knew, but they really came on the forefront. So it kind of it reinforced our message and our approach. Pandemic. And even though we were devastated in the beginning, because our core thing was an international festival of bringing people together and using that engine for collaborations to be born, and then we're like, okay, let's go online. But what has been brought to us is like, we're connected all the time. Like, for example, this companionship program that we have, there's people from South Africa, Chile, Finland. We meet once a month. Like that's a luxury. So in that sense, that has brought us things. But now there seems to be, like, if there first was this hope that, this is a turning point, but the systems are really trying to get us back, like, let's consume because we need to get the economy booming. And it's like, was this really a window of opportunity, or just opened a little and closed, banging? I guess the challenge is the time. We've said that Untitled lasts for 10 years, so it gives us time. People have been like, oh, great, 10 years. That's it's not just like a fun project or 10 years, but it's very little time that we need to turn the ship. And we're doing experimental things. What I fear is, like, we don't get those things to really spread in the time that we should. So fighting the time.
Fighting. Thank you. It's true. I think that this window of time that we are having, or we had, it's really the window for crazy ideas, crazy decisions. Because either we do it now, or maybe we don't have any more time to do it. Menno, what about European Cultural Foundation? What's next?
Well, it's also okay if I make it big rather than,
go.
It's also more or less, but I think it's a huge challenge. So apart from what's exactly the result is of how we shape the new normal, I think the main thing for us is about the process, and that also connects very well to the theme of this conversation. Of course, that's the risk is that everyone goes back in their own little filter bubble and thinks about what's best, but we don't have a shared space where we discuss these kind of things together and discuss what is actually our shared interest and what is our shared solution that we think it's best to how we shape society as well. And that's why the goal of ICF for the upcoming years is we're European Cultural Foundation, so in our case, to shape a European public sphere where people of all backgrounds can discuss this shared European interest together beyond national filter bubbles, beyond kind of opinion filter bubbles. And this European public sphere consists of physical spaces that are interconnected to each other in different cities. It also connects of media spaces. We hope for more media collaboration, but based on public values, because if we leave it to the big tech companies in Silicon Valley or the Chinese platforms, then the main incentive will be the profit of these platforms or maybe the interest of the Chinese state. But it's important that the main interest of having this media and digital environment is the interest of the citizens. Yeah, the crucial pillar for democracy is the public space. So therefore, our work for the next few years is about creating that space and all the different, or spaces, I should say, maybe, where all the different perspectives can be shared and where shared culture, as the way how we negotiate living together, is being developed.
Thanks a lot, Menno. We had design, we had time, we have space, all the three, let's say, parameters of the future. I thank you so much, Outi Kuitinen, Menno Weiss, and Jesse Carson. We will try to travel through time and space in the next conversation. At 3:30, there is a conversation about new frontiers of technology and science between ethics and artificial intelligence with José Luis de Vicente and Ghislaine Boddington. I thank you very much and see you later. Thanks again to my colleague panelists, and please keep on following the Starts Urban Fest. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda, and everybody else.
Really nice meeting you. Thank you.
Really nice meeting you.
Bye-bye. Nice to meet you.